Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the family guy. We're recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you.
Okay, let's do this. Are we recording? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, neighbors, cats, dogs, teachers, international teachers, non-international teachers, people thinking about becoming international teachers. This is the International Teacher Podcast, and we are getting the band back together after a long, well-deserved summer break. This is Matt, the family guy.
And Greg, the single guy.
It sounds so buttery when you say it like that. You're working on your TJ voice.
I've been practicing all summer.
Hello, everybody. This is the teacher. Welcome. Sorry, we're gonna be a little.
Didn't I tell you I have
today.
a radio show? I have my own radio show at like 4 a.m. You know, that's
What?
one of those early morning radio shows. Didn't you know that?
Do not.
Listening to the sounds of Vianney at 3 a.m. Welcome to the.
Are you kidding me?
I'm just joking.
I was gonna say, how dare you not tell me about this? Is Yanni live at the Acropolis, coming at you at 4:15 a.m. That's right.
You're just
Who needs coffee when you got
voice.
me? Who needs? This
I'll
is
put
your
you to
wake up
sleep
call.
fast.
No, this isn't a nightmare. This is your wake up call. Hello.
Oh God, that reminds
So
me of
anyway,
Seinfeld. With go ahead.
Anyway, for those of you who want to get a hold of us, remember you can always write to us at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We wanted to make sure we had the longest handle for a podcast name, for a podcast address. So make sure you hit us up on Gmail if you got anything you want to talk about. And we can be found on Instagram at ITP Expats. That's ITPEXPATS on Instagram. And we have a Twitter account, but I'm not sure we ever tweeted or anything like that. So we don't really have a lot of profound things to say. So we pretty much stayed off Twitter, I think. Haven't we?
Yeah, I think we're on it, but we just don't do anything with it. So yeah, that's not
You know,
a lot of fun.
Not to bash the folks at Twitter, but I just have found, maybe it's my age, I just find it to be a platform I don't interact with a lot, other than maybe for a few sports updates and things like that. But I haven't found it terribly, I don't know. What do you think? Is that something you use a lot of?
No, I really don't like the past tense words. I get stuck on them like you do. Like I just twitted or I tweeted or I had done tweeted or, you know, I get lost in the vocabulary there. I'm not big on Twitter. I used to. Yeah. It's not as much fun as podcasting, really, to tell you the
Could
truth.
be, yeah. I don't know if it's tweeting or twatting or what it is, but anyway, it all sounds inappropriate. This is a
It
family
does.
show, and we
It's
will
a
not
family
stoop to
show
those
that-
levels.
That's right. And, you know, it's great to have you back, Matt, because it's been a long summer without you. And I know that we'll get into more of that. I was just going to say it's good to have you back because now we have more advertising. I like the way you started off our episode with an advertising campaign. I never do it.
We have more advertising. That's right. Well, we need to get some sponsors now, and we need to go out and secure a few sponsors, and then we can do even more advertising, and then really build this into a global brand. I think everybody will want to tune in.
Brought to you by M.Ed, who washes your bike.
Hey, you gotta start somewhere. And you know what? You gotta love guys like M.Ed who have their hustle, because that's, you know what? They make their daily hustle. It's tax free. You know, little
That's
under
right.
the table side action. You got to do that.
And they do things
So,
that we don't want to do. We pay them hard-earned cash to wash the bike once a week. It turns out to be once a month.
have we ever? I think we talked earlier in our podcast about the type of all the people that you end up helping out. Just
No,
we haven't
I don't
talked
know how
about
much
that
we
yet.
did. You're right. We did talk a little bit about having maids before, right?
Well, nannies.
you help them out and they
mentioned
help
our
you
nanny.
out.
Yeah, we've got that. We talked about the gardener. You know, we have a gardener. We don't have a garden. We just have a guy who kind of sprays our sidewalk down and rakes up our leaves. And
Yeah, I didn't think we talked about modern stuff. I think we talked like in Benny what we were people that we had working for us and stuff.
yeah.
We don't talk
Over
too much
here
about the present
Middle
day,
East.
but
Yeah. Okay, maybe that's the later episode we'll have to talk about. So, Greg, what do you want our topic to be today? What do you want to hit on and go?
I just want our listeners to know what you did all summer. I mean, I was missing you because I only went back a real short time dipped into the States for only 20 days or so. And you went back for the summertime and went fishing and all that good stuff. And I think the audience would like to know what an international teacher from a international teacher podcast after many years does over the summertime. And you and I are vastly different in what we do.
Oh yeah.
You're the family guy and I'm the single guy.
Yeah, that's true. You have definitely a little more travel flexibility built into your schedule and things like that. It's funny when you look at what traveling is, and after you travel for a while, you realize how small the world becomes and how interconnected everything is. And so when I was telling friends back home about our flights, so we ended up going through, I was really pumped to go home this summer, obviously, because it's been 2 years, which is too long if you ask me. But we were flying through Doha, Qatar, which Qatar Airways, good pitch for them, is by far and away my favorite airline. I love flying them. King Hamad, oh dear, I forgot the airport. It's an awesome airport. It's huge. It's clean. Anyway, there's tons of space. So I was really excited to be going back through there again. Otherwise, we hadn't gone through there in like 3-4 years when we went through the Maldives on our last trip. And so to do that meant from Doha was a 15-hour, 40-minute flight to Chicago. And I think a lot of people where I come from in Minnesota, the idea of flying to Cancun is enough to make you pass out because that's like a 3.5-4 hour flight, which is nothing.
Did you say 15.4 or 15 hours?
15 hours and 40 minutes was our flight.
And that's from gate to gate. That's in the air, just to make things clear to our listeners. Yeah. That's like if you take a 45-minute from Minneapolis to Green Bay, that's 45 minutes, right? Or 45 from Chicago to Minneapolis. You're talking 15 hours straight.
Yeah.
Plus.
It was interesting because on our flight out of our host country where we live or are living and flew into Doha, it was incredibly packed. We weren't sure if it would be a light flight or fairly empty. And it was interesting. A bulk of the people from there were, speaking of the news lately, were from Afghanistan. And so it's really, and then there was basically 200 people from Afghanistan and then a family with 3 blonde haired kids and a little brown haired kid. And it was cool. It was a nice flight. We got into Doha. We were getting on that flight to go to Chicago. We're happy. We kind of 2-stepping up the aisle, almost dancing. It's just ready to get out and ready to go home. And we get to our row. And it's the bathroom aisle. That's right. The non-reclining seats right next to the bathrooms. We were right in front of the bathrooms. So, Greg, you can imagine my smile dissipated quickly upon finding out that we were going to have to sit next to the crapper for the next 16 hours.
And you can't lean back. You can't lounge back. You have to have a straight back, but you're right by the toilet. So
yeah, to their credit, they did put some seats in that mildly reclined. So it was like 10% recline, which is way better than like KLM and Delta, where you're just sitting straight, maybe more upright. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to make the best of this. We're going to have a positive attitude. We're going to have a great trip and nobody's going to stink up the bathroom. It's like, okay, great. I'm trying not to get too long-winded here, but so I had to use the restroom really quickly upon getting in, and I wait, and this one young lady comes out, and she had puked all over the bathroom everywhere. This plane hasn't even left the ground yet. And we got a puker. And I'm like, hey, that lady, I wasn't going to tell on her, but I wanted to be like, hey, get that lady off the plane. She's puking.
Sometimes you have to. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't. She could have been pregnant. She could have been scared. Maybe she looked like she hadn't done a lot of traveling. She's probably 20. And I was like, you know what? Let's give her the benefit of the doubt. And so I just notified the poor stewardess, like, clean up an aisle 7, Herb, because this is a bad one.
Did they clean it up right away?
Yeah. She got on it. Like within minutes, God. It was cleaned up. Yeah, it was great. The smell was gone. And by that point, whatever. We're just happy to get off the ground. If you ever fly on Sri Lankan Air, they just won't even bother. They won't bother with it. They just leave it there. Sri Lankan Air. So that's where we flew our first time to Maldives. Great food, though.
Well, they didn't clean up. When I went to Sri Lanka, they didn't clean it up and somebody threw up right away in the bag. It was all clogged and everything. That's terrible thoughts. But I, like you, I'm a big fan of Qatar Airways. So what happened after they cleaned it up? I mean, was that 15 hours of like puke smell, or was it,
here, you're gonna like this. At one point I was flying along, I was watching a movie, and this smell just hits me like a Mack truck, and I'm just shudder. And I was sitting with my twins too, and even they kind of sat up and were like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And I turned, and I was like, "Man, somebody in the bathroom just died." And I looked across the aisle, and Stacy, my wife, was eating kale chips. And I turned to her, I said, "Is that the kale chips you're eating?" And she stopped and she stuck her nose in the bag, and she's like, "Oh yeah, these smell." I was like, "Oh my God. Those are horrendous."
Remind me never to eat kale chips.
I won't ever eat them. Here, do you want some? I was like, "It smells like an animal died in your bag." No, like, put those away. I thought it was the bathroom that smelled. It was kale chips.
It's like keeping seaweed in your I don't know, under your couch for a month or something, right? Is
this new kale? Like, that's the levels that health food, like, you could go for a walk or you could eat kale chips instead of potato chips. That was new for me. I'd never seen those before. So anyway, the flight was great. We watched movies. The kids, we pretty much let them stay up the entire time and play games and stuff. Don't judge us, because it's 16 hours on a plane and it's by the bathrooms. And what are you going to do? It was loud. And by the way, the food too was just, for airline food, was unbelievable. We had like some curry chicken dinner. I ate mine, all the boys' dinners. I ate like 4 dinners on the flight home. So no big deal. We're coming into Chicago. You can see, it in the distance. All of a sudden the pilot comes on. He's like, "Yeah, they just shut down O'Hare because there's some big storms that are about to roll in and we're almost out of gas. So we're going to reroute to Minneapolis, St. Paul." And everybody on the plane is groaning and I'm laughing hysterically. I'm like, because we're about to fly to Chicago to get in a car to drive 8 hours to the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, but we're going to end up flying on a plane. And so we ended up landing in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We sat on the runway for 2.5 hours in the dark recesses of the airport where nobody can see you. And
wasn't there some guy next to you too?
There was a Lebanese guy in my aisle who was looking out the window going, "That's my house. I can see my house from the window." But they wouldn't we asked, we're like, "Can you at least let us off the plane?" And they're like, "No, sorry." And so I get that. I understand why there's safety protocols and luggage and everything like that. So we waited 2.5 hours. So what are we at? 1540 plus 2 more, 1740 plus 30 minutes, 18 hours, 10 minutes, then another hour, 20 minutes back to Chicago. So what are we at? 19 and a half hours. And then, you sit on the plane and everybody unloads they load a plane quickly and then they unload a plane like they've never gotten off of a plane before. So that's another 40 minutes sitting in there. So we're almost at 20 hours in the bathroom row. Like, we should have got at least a badge or a sticker or something for that, if you ask me. And so anyway, we got into O'Hare Airport, and anybody that's flown through O'Hare knows what a disaster that airport is. And it took an hour and a half to get our bags there. So from door to door, from our door in the Middle East to the hotel door, I think we were at like 25 and a half hours of travel. And so the boys were done, except for our oldest, Karu. My dad and brother met us at the airport, and we were looking at going to get something to eat. My oldest is like, "Hey, let's go. I'm ready. Let's do this." And his brothers and mother, they were all passed out at the hotel already. It was great. It was really nice.
You're going to hate me, Matt. Mine was like a 180 from yours. Oh,
yeah. Let's hear about your flight by yourself, traveling alone.
Well, like you, I flew out of I flew out of Qatar. I flew into Qatar. From this country, I flew into Qatar on an airplane full of people. I was the only white person on the entire flight because all of the Americans and I'm saying I was probably, late July? Yeah. It was like mid-July, July 14th. July 14th. My buddy Dave and I flew out together and went through all that hassle, whatever, with the shots and everything. But we get to Qatar and there's nothing to do. So we sit around for 8 hours and I get on the plane, which is going to be another, it's like 14 to 15 hours for me too. Same flight, right to Chicago.
15 hours, 40 minutes. Yeah, you were going to Chicago too. That's right.
I think we had a different wind or something. It was only like 15 hours, as opposed to your 1540. Yeah. But anyway, I got on my 15-hour flight and I'm sitting in the back row by the toilets too. However, it was planned that I would sit back there because I'm going to drink lots of beer, right? Mm-hmm. Since I don't have to worry about kids, I'm just going to drink quite a few things on the way just to celebrate being in an environment where I can drink again.
Absolutely, you should.
It's not all about alcohol, but it is when you're on a flight after so long. It's been months and months and months, right? Probably 6 to 8 months. Anyway, I get on the flight. Dave's got his own row up in the 20s. I'm way back in the 40s, and I have my own row in the middle of the 777. So we're talking 4 seats that recline that are all mine. And I'm just watching people come in and waiting for someone else to sit in my aisle, but it didn't happen.
Please, God,
and I was like, this is fantastic.
Please, God, don't sit by me. Yeah, Greg, that's like great.
Everyone that walks in, I'm going, don't sit. So the plane's taking off, and I just lay down and sleep for like 6 hours straight. Right through everything else, the first meal, I'm not like you. I don't like to eat the plane food. Plane food. I don't like to eat the food on the plane. Yeah. And that's just me. I like to have a nice light stomach and fill it up with other things. So I have my little Baileys and I have my beers and stuff. But I tell you what, Matt, I had a 15-hour flight. I think I woke up to have maybe a beer and then went back to sleep. It was 15 hours of sleeping on a plane. I've never had that before in my life. Sure. Especially I thought it was going to be packed like sardines, like in most other flights these days. But I had a great time, and I flew into Chicago, and I literally got off, waited for about 45 minutes for my luggage, and brought 2 luggage back for Dave. I go back empty-handed, but I brought back 2 for Dave. Sure. And I sat there and had a little breakfast with Dave at Chicago, and then he jumped on his next plane to Springfield, and I got what did I do? I got I had to get a PCR test right at Chicago. So I did that just for my sister-in-law. I did that and to make sure I hadn't contracted anything, and then made sure that I walked up to the national aisle. You take that shuttle over to the convention center where they have like 8 levels of cars in a parking garage. I go up, get into a car, and just leave. But I was so tired, I ended up going to a little. I usually stop right outside of Chicago on the Wisconsin borderline. There's this Woodbridge Hotel. I stopped there, and like in Pewaukee or whatever that is, and I just walk in and I take a room. And the first thing I said to the lady, is your restaurant open? It was closed during COVID. She said, yes. I said, great. I'm just going to have a beer. She says it opens in 9 minutes. And I said, okay, where can I go to get my beer then? She said, but sir, it'll be open in 9 minutes. I said, yeah, but where's the nearest gas station? I have 9 minutes to get a beer. And all I wanted was beer and bratwurst and cheese curds, buddy. Yeah. And that was it. That was the start of mine, but that was my flight. It was pretty good. And you know what I have to say for our listeners out there, the first time, I'm going to say what a great traveler Matt has become, because the first couple times I flew with Matt, you were just a train wreck. In fact, you'd usually have to medicate a little bit before we take off. If you don't mind my saying, that's the old Matt. That's the old Matt, right? Yeah. And you'd be saying a few prayers. You'd be medicating. You try and do everything to not think about the plane crashing. Yeah. And that was literally Matt Judd traveling with me the first couple times when I met you years and years back. And you've come so far.
Yeah. I don't even take medication anymore to fly. I just have done it.
You're getting onto a 15-hour flight with four little kids and a wife that eats horrible smelling food, and you're like, all you do is laugh when they say you have 2 more hours to fly back to the place that you know. What a story! So yours is so 180 different than mine is. Fantastic stories.
When you have 4 kids like we do, number one, I was just happy. Well, I was just happy to be getting out of there. The bathroom, I was fine. I mean, it's just funny. It's good for telling stories. But the flight was fine. I was perfectly content to sit there because, hey, we were going home and I didn't care. But
a man that's changed as many diapers in his life as you have is probably not bothered by a bathroom.
Just the fact that my nuts weren't going to be used as a hacky sack for the next 15 hours by one of my kids as they dance on my lap. That was something I was really happy about. And the 3 oldest ones can go to the bathroom by themselves now. So all I do is just help them put their shoes on, lift them over me and put them in the aisle and off they go. And they'll go
now that they're in their teens. Now that they're in their teens,
Now
they're
that there's going to be 7 in a couple weeks.
Just joking.
They literally they were walking the aisles, just getting their legs stretched and stretching in the back of the plane, talking to the stewardesses. I mean, you spend time in planes and airports when your kids just hang out on the plane like it's part of their house. So, you know what? One thing I didn't get, and maybe this is a cultural thing. Have you ever seen people walking around planes in their socks? Not the fancy. Okay, they're not fancy. Not the airplane compression socks, but just there's this dude in the bathroom, and he was walking around in his gray dress socks. And I know this because he was leaving wet footprints through the back of the plane. And I was like, that's the most disgusting thing. Put some shoes on, my man.
No, you gotta suit up before you go to the bathroom. Otherwise, it's shoes off.
I don't get that. I didn't get that at all. Yeah. So, hey, we landed in Chicago. My dad and brother met us. It was amazing to see them. One of my favorite parts of my summer was the next day when we drove from Chicago to our lake house in Wisconsin. It was about a 7-hour drive. And just, I haven't had a chance to just sit and talk with my dad for a while, and the kids were sleeping, and we had a great time just sitting and driving and talking. That was probably one of my top 3 favorite days. It was pouring rain too, which we haven't seen rain in 2 years. It was just great.
It's green too, right? Green,
yeah, we're listening. Everything was so green, and you just, and then the thing is, like, when you're gone that long, like, I couldn't really remember what home looked like. And all I remembered was pulling into our driveway. And I had Crosby, our 4-year-old, with us. And our driveway's long and it goes through the woods. And he's like, oh my God, we have woods? I was like, well, yeah, you don't remember this? He says, no, I don't remember this. And we pulled into the yard and he got out and he just took off running through the yard. He's like, there's a lake, like there's a hill, there's grass. Like his mind was officially blown. So Greg, I have this ritual that I do when I leave the lake house. It's before I get in the car to go to the airport. I leave the house.
This is a family channel. Family channel.
Yeah. Of course. Why? What did I say? Something? Did I say a bad word? Oh, I was going to say I'm not teaching right now. I didn't know if a bad word came up. And so what I do is I go down to the dock. I don't put on my shoes and socks, and I walk into the lake and scrunch my toes into the sand, and just it's my way of saying goodbye to the lake and thank you. I know this sounds tacky and cheesy, but don't judge me. Someday, whatever. You got to try it. And so then I get out and I shake the sand off. I put my shoes and socks on, get in the car, and we drive to the airport. So the very first thing I did, I have a recording of it. I walked down to the dock, took my shoes and socks off, jumped back into the lake, scrunched up my feet. I always use the same exact spot and was like, okay, I'm home. And then went into the house, and we won't even talk about that. I pretty much just laid down on the living room floor and hugged the floor and bawled for about 20 minutes and had a moment. And, it was fun.
Well, if I had a place like yours on the lake in Wisconsin, I would take my shoes off and I would go down to the lake and dig my toes in there and let the minnows just nibble a little bit. I'd probably sit there for 2 hours. You'd be like, what's wrong with Greg? What? Of course, I'd have a beer in my hand, but you'd be like, what's wrong with Greg? Someone needs to bring him another beer because he's just standing there frozen. Exactly. Yeah. But I think I love that you do that because that grounds you. You've talked about that before. That lake house is just home. And the fact that Crosby didn't even remember having woods or a lake is funny, but it reminds you of how Carew doesn't remember his first snowball in Germany either, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
These memories for your kids are so drastically different, going from a desert to a woods when you are old enough to remember it. I mean, compared to 4. I love that story.
Yeah. And it just, you can't beat when you get home and the way your house smells. And it's just, I don't know. It's just weird. Like your senses are awakened and it's like you're experiencing things for the first time again. And it's just incredible. It was pretty funny. Stacy ended up having a few too many apple cider whatevers. And I think she was conked out after about 2 hours. But hey, it's been 2 years. So she was celebrating and I was just, I don't even remember what I did. I think I went in and grabbed my fishing pole and something to eat quick and went fishing right away. And the other 3, the oldest 3, have you ever seen those old Time Life books that from the Civil War? And it shows all the Civil War pictures. Easily within 45 minutes, our entire yard looked like a Civil War battle reenactment. Just every possible toy, ball, glove, you name it, was out in our yard. It was like, they were like, okay, we're officially home. Let's kick this party off. Oh, I remember too. We have some good sized speakers outside on our patio too. And so we had the Jimmy Buffett blaring, of course, just to welcome everybody back to that one particular harbor. And man, it was
nice reference there. That's a beautiful reference to that.
2 years of being gone. That just, yeah. And then of course, then there's when I don't know what it was like for you. You're pretty, I don't know what I would say, emotionally stoic. I don't know. Did you bawl when you saw everybody?
I'm not emotionally stoic.
Yeah.
You know, I do have
feelings. No, you're definitely an emotional guy,
it.
but okay, you weren't a blubbering mess every time somebody new pulled into your driveway. Let's just say
Did the mailman show up and you just broke down or what, Matt?
Amazon, yes, I've missed
I love you so much.
Guy's like, whoa, buddy, whoa. That restraining order. We talked about this.
Where's Bill? This is Tommy. I don't understand. I'm gonna cry on your shoulder anyway. No, I don't get that way.
So when you went home, what was something you did that you were like, oh, I cannot wait to do this? And then you did it, not beer related, but just something you wanted to do, you were really looking forward to.
That's a tough one. Well, I only went home for a little bit, but I think the first thing I wanted to do was just, jumping in the car was great. Driving. I hadn't driven in so long. Yes. I mean, it sounds sort of not family related, but for me personally, I don't drive a car right now. I drive a moped for the last 5 years. And
I love mopeds. I have one.
And I've driven on other sides of the road before. And you always pick me up, Matt. You always pick me up and drive to my city, pick me up, take me to the mall and have dinner. But in the States, you know, I rented a car for the whole 20 days I was there, and I drove it thousands and thousands of miles. But my first thing I wanted to do was actually get in a car and drive. And I'm pulling out of the parking lot, and I'm like, screw this. I want a different car. So I get out of that car and get into a Jeep and put my luggage in the Jeep and pick a different one because it smelled like cigarettes and I can't handle that. So I guess it was just that idea of driving, but it was tiring too because I only made it for about 45 minutes on the highway out of Chicago into Wisconsin before. I was like, I can't do this. But it was a great feeling. And landing in the summertime rather than the wintertime was also a treat because I don't have to worry about clothes, you know. I mean, I had clothes on my back, but I didn't have to worry about the cold. So that was the first thing I was really into was being in the car. And the next thing I have to do is sort of go into one of my family's homes that I'm familiar with and going to my little brother's house. Jason and Aaron have a house, which is just home to me. So I have that feeling of I'm home again. As soon as I hit there, the area, the city, I know my most recent home is Jason and Aaron. And I feel right at home when I get into Green Bay. And when I pull into their driveway and just walk in their kitchen and, you know, I called them ahead of time and say, hey, I'm home. I'll meet you. First thing I did, get in the car with Erin. She drove and we went and had lunch with my brother. So that was just a great thing to sit down with my sister-in-law and my brother and have lunch. We had tacos, authentic, nice Mexican food. So it was good stuff.
That is good.
Yeah, but I didn't have a lake yet. I had to wait for a couple of days before I went to a lake in Jason and Aaron's lake house. And I'm not as much a lake person as you are anymore. I'm more of a, I just get in the water, want to dive. But it was a wonderful feeling to be back home. So tell me, let's go back to you now, bounce back into your life and tell me what you, some of the things that you did, because you were there from what time to what time? You were there from
We were there from June 24th till August 10th. And it literally felt like we were there for 4 hours. Like all of a sudden, like I remember walking home, my shoes are off, I'm in the lake to, all right, roll them up, kids. Let's get in the car. We're back to the airport. Yeah, it was well, if you think about it, you've got 2 years of house stuff to get, you have 2 years of house stuff to get done. You have 2 years of family to try to see. Like we had all sorts of plans to see other people and just, for whatever reason.
Do they come see you or do you go see them? Now that you have you've had it for years.
We pretty much, I think we were home for 41 days in our house. And I think we had people at our house 36 out of the 41 days. And so that's great. We loved seeing everybody and I would never, ever complain about that. It's a blessing. Never, ever complain. But at some point
still hosting,
you're coming home. Yeah, you're hosting, but you're trying to recharge too, because when you think about what everybody's gone through that time, it's still mentally taxing. And when you're back trying to recharge and you never really get that downtime or alone time. That can be a challenge. So you really have to try and push to squeeze that in. And sometimes you have to say no to this or that. And it's people you really want to desperately see. But yeah, that's one of the hard parts of having to be home. But
well, they want to come and see you, and that's great. You have a great lake house. They want to come and spend time with you and relax.
Yeah,
Their weekend or during the week.
Yeah, no, we would never. We always tell people we don't really invite tons of people. It's just more of an open door policy. Give us 3 hours head start so we can go get beer and food. But we have a huge house and there's plenty of space, so that's never ever a
What's
problem.
your address, Matt? What's your address for the people listening out there? Just kidding.
We're apartment 4. But yeah, it was nice. So, and beyond that though, you're juggling the demands of your house, trying to see family, trying to see all your friends. You're trying to soak up every single minute on the lake, just being outside in the green space. We barely went anywhere. We didn't go out to eat. We went to like Jimmy John's a couple times and Subway a couple times. Otherwise, we literally stayed at the house because it was just so nice to be there and be in that green space. And yeah, the only other times we went anywhere, we went to a couple of St. Paul Saints games, which is the Twins AAA affiliate. For those of you Minnesota peeps who haven't gone to any of those yet, honestly, the Saints games are more fun than the Twins games. The Saints have done a really good job of marketing that club. And it's funny, they're probably the only minor league team in baseball who has out merchandised and out branded the big league club. Like when you look at the Saints stuff, their team, I don't know, I just look at this, their team merchandise is phenomenal. And the Twins stuff looks like you could get it at Walmart. But anyway,
you can get
we had a great time. Right? What's that?
You can get it at Walmart, right?
Not to knock Walmart, because I love Walmart. I am a diehard Walmart shopper. I'm just saying, if you're branding, don't let your minor league team do it better than your major league team. Sorry, Twins, if you're listening to this. So we went to some Saints games. We went to a couple of Twins games. It was still great to be back at Target Field. And then the boys Carew and the Twins did a week at the University of Minnesota Golden Gopher baseball camp, which if any of you have ever thought of signing your kids up for that, it is really well done. It's a really good use of your money, and the kids get a ton of baseball for not a lot of cash. So otherwise we stayed at the lake, just hanging out. It was great. But then also grad school. So then trying to see everybody, spend time with everybody. And then the weekend would roll around and I'd have 10 to 15 hours worth of work that I had to try and squeeze in. It made for a couple really hectic late night weekends and Sunday nights, but overall, no complaints. It was just incredibly busy. I'm looking forward to next summer, hoping that it may not be as busy as this one.
Well, that's why we had to have Kent sit in on this ITP. Kent tried to do a good job like you've done. And he's a different kind of person. He did okay, but it's just not the same as Matt Judd on the microphone, right?
Yeah. Well, I just have a lot of hot air to expel. That's all. I was trying to think of, it's really funny when you go home and you have all these grand plans. And I forget who I was talking to the other day. And my favorite day of the entire summer was a day filled with 100 little moments. It wasn't a big thing. And I'll tell you about it super quickly, but it's just funny how if you just take time to take stock of some of the cool little things that life offers you, it just makes for some great memories. Woke up early one morning, went and I get a golf membership at the Siren National Golf Club up there. I walk 18 holes. I do that 4 or 5 days a week. So anyway, got up, went golfing. I got home and the boys and I ended up playing baseball in the yard for a while. We have a pitching machine. I don't know if it's called a Jugs, not Judd, but Jug with a G. It's called a Light Flight. Anyway, we have this pitching machine and we have like hitting stations set up in our yard. We have hitting screens set up and we have home run derby. So if you hit a ball and it gets out over the dock into the lake, it counts as a home run. So it gets a little out of hand and, a couple people may or may not have been shot by the pitching machine balls. But so the boys and I played baseball. We ended up hanging out and then the boys wanted to go fishing. I was like, you guys, it's like 90 degrees and it's noon and you want to go fish. They're like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, why not? So we all jumped in the walleye boat. We took off to the other side of the lake. I was like, there is no way in heck we're going to catch a fish. And we started trolling literally for maybe 12 seconds. Boom, first fish on. I hand the pole to Walker, my one of my twins, and let him fight it and bring it in. It's a really nice walleye, like a keeper too. And so we're all pretty jazzed about that. Like, unbelievable. 6-year-old brings in a big old walleye, and we're fishing. About 2 minutes later, Carew, my oldest, was like, I got a fish, which every little bump he yells he has a fish. I'm like, whatever, you don't have a fish. And I turn, look at the back of the boat, this massive splash and swirl. I was just like, oh my God, you have a big fish. And so he hooked it himself, brought in this really big northern, probably about a 7-pound northern pike. And I netted it for him, but he fought it the whole way, caught it, fought it, and brought it in. And so he was pretty jacked about that too. We got some great pictures of it. We threw the northern back in, and we fished a little more, and the boys ate all their snacks and drank all their water. And we got a call, and one of the things we had to do was go pick up hockey equipment for them, because they're starting ice hockey back here in the desert again. So that starts up next month. And so we had to drive to Duluth. And so we turned around, headed back to the lake house, and we filleted our walleye up, threw it in the freezer, cleaned up, jumped in the car, and headed to Duluth, which Duluth is my favorite city in Minnesota. And we hadn't had a chance to get there the entire summer, and we didn't know if we were going to. And so we rolled up and spent way too much money on hockey equipment, as any hockey parent would know. We went to Play It Again Sports, of course, because you buy used stuff to save money, but you still pay through the backside. And we just hung out in Duluth for the night and had Jimmy John's by Lake Superior, and just, enjoyed our space and our time. That was my favorite day this summer. Golf, fishing, Duluth. Very uneventful, but just full of just kind of hanging out with the boys. And
I don't think it's uneventful. It's really it's a series of moments, like you said.
Yeah. And it's just, So I've got, pictures of their fish, and they tell everybody here about the fish they caught. And it was obviously one of their favorite days too. It's just funny how you wake up with no real grand plans, and then all of a sudden these little things happen. And it was by far and away the best part of the summer. So,
well, Carew was telling me how big that fish was, but still, I have the record on your lake of fish that are not caught. I usually catch lily pads, and that one fish was massive. I mean, that's the one that's always it's my great whale on that lake.
For the uninitiated, Greg's referring to this massive catfish that he almost caught. He got it to our dock, and we just couldn't get it in the net. It was pretty stinking big, and it broke your pole.
It did.
Let's not knock your fishing prowess or abilities, because it's pretty fantastic. So
no, when I go home in the summertime, if I get to come and see you, all I do is I buy a 1-day fishing pole, which is a $20 at that little fishing mart there. And I get my 1-day license, right? Yeah, Big Mike's. And that's all I do is I fish for about 20 minutes with you before I break the pole, at least, right? And we just sit there and listen to Buffett, and I watch you fish. Or I help your kids fish.
What didn't you get to do that you really wanted to do, but you were like, man, there's not enough time for that?
Well, I'll give you the nutshell of my 20. Well, I was there for 21 days, so 3 weeks. I flew in and drove to Green Bay, saw my brother and sister-in-law, hung out with them for a little bit, went up to Minnesota to see. Oh, we went to their lake house after that, so I got to see that family. And my sister-in-law was doing well at the time. So I got in the car, drove up to Minnesota, saw my oldest niece has twins that were born on the 20th of August. I didn't get to see the twins born, but the Minnesota twins, the girls were there in the tummy, and I got to say hi and just check in on them. So now I'm a great Uncle Greg. I'm a Gug and in the family. So after I actually got to see my other two nieces too, which is real special. I don't always get to spend much time with them. They're older. They're past college, and so I made it real quick. I wanted to get down to see my parents in Florida. So I had planned out this long trip, and I basically went from Chicago, Green Bay, Minnesota down to see my new godchild in Kansas City, Kansas to Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
Springfield, Missouri to all the way down to Naples, Florida, and then Naples to Miami, and Miami fly out. And that was in 21 days. And basically all that was done in the first 10 days. What were you going to say about that?
Did you say Naples, Florida?
I did.
Okay, I love Naples, Florida. Greg, you want to tell people why I love Naples, Florida so much?
No, I'm going to let you say it, man.
There's a restaurant in Naples, Florida, right
Marco
between.
Island,
Is
Matt.
it?
It's Marco.
Is it Marco?
Yeah.
Is it
It's
between
down in
Marco
Marco.
and Naples, or is it in
No,
Marco?
if you go, we always went from Naples down to Marco. Yeah.
Oh, that's why. Okay. All right.
But
Well,
you
I love
get
Marco.
all heated up no matter what. Yeah.
I love Marco Island, but I'm a Naples guy. I'm a what do I say? I'm a Marco guy on a Naples budget. Or
There you
actually
go.
whatever that little trailer park right in between the two of them is, that's kind of where I'm at. That's my wheelhouse. That's my budget. But it's still super expensive, but still. There's a restaurant there called the Snook Inn. And if you've ever been to the Snook, you listeners out there, all 12 of you, chime in if you have, because it's this cool place. It's right on the water, family-owned restaurant, great food, especially really good seafood, salad bar, always live music. It's just a really, I don't know. It's like a chill place that, like when we were working in Venezuela and South America, we always ended up stopping at the Snook to eat. So it's like, I look forward to the day I can bring my kids there and have them complain about the food and not get to enjoy myself. But the point being, I'll still get to take the kids there and they won't appreciate it. But anyway,
I learned something new, Matt. I learned that my mom and dad don't even like the Snook. Mom and dad, they're true Floridians
anymore,
now.
Greg. Dave and Pat, if you're listening, we have to talk. Why don't they like the
No,
Snook?
they said, you know what, Greg, you go to the Snook all by yourself. So I went to the Snook for you and for me, virtually for you. I sat at the Snook for no less than 6 hours one day. And because I spent a lot of time with my parents, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But I sat down at the Snook, and the reason I sat there for so long was people watching, right? It's the Snook is owned. It's a hotel restaurant, and it's locally owned. So there's all of the locals go there for lunch for the crowd, right? There's live music afternoon and evening. It opens at 11, and they have an afternoon live music and then an evening live music. The locals go there to have lunch, but the tourists are all there because it's a hotel. And it's right on the water, so the ships are coming up and dropping people off. There's septuagenarians, there's teenagers, there's everything in between. And I just loved sitting there because I could have ordered everything off the menu 3 times over. I could have called a taxi or called an ambulance to get home instead of driving. But I just chose to sit there and have a beer once in a while and sat there for the afternoon typing away on a newsletter. It was just, I loved every minute of it, just like you do. And they have the big pickles. They have the huge pickle barrel at the beginning of the buffet. And it's great fish, the local fish that they have. Oh, man. I had a blast sitting there and went there probably 2 or 3 days.
Live picture updates when you were doing that. Yeah.
And I did that just to get away a little bit because, I spent my time was mainly for my parents. I went down there. They're sort of, my mom's not well, so she's in the apartment. She's in the house, right? They're in a house. And my dad's sort of playing nurse now and getting my mom to feel a lot better. Their pool wasn't working, so they felt bad about that, even though I didn't really care. I just wanted to be there with them. And we sat there and we played some great games. So my dad and I put together basically an amusement park in the kitchen out of like these Tinker toys, right? Had a blast. I tell you what, Matt, you asked me the one special thing about my whole vacation was since maybe, 2015, when my parents came to Europe, I have not spent that much time just with my mom and dad and myself since then. And it is priceless when you do that. And I guess the cool thing is I don't do it that often. So when I do hang out with them for a long extended period of time, and it has been a while, that it's that much more special, right? Because I love them to death. It was great to sit there with mom and dad. And, my dad's joking around about you all the time. He's like, yeah, Matt Judd needs to go with you to the Snook. I don't need to go to the Snook anymore.
Well, all right. Tell you what, next summer when we're home, let's make it a point to go to the Snook.
We'll have to, because you traveled, didn't you, to go see different baseball teams, Matt? Didn't you do a little travel? I thought you were going to go see some stadiums.
I had originally, So because of this master's program I'm in for professional sports management, I had professional sports administration. I had hoped to meet up. I've been in contact with several major league teams about prospectively working for them. And I had hoped to arrange some in-person meetings. And as the summer wore on, they kind of tightened up their inner circles in terms of who they were going to let in or who they'd have meetings with and things like that. So unfortunately, that never ended up getting to pan out this summer. And we still talk via email and things like that and on the phone. So, but those face-to-face meetings that we had talked about in our first discussions never materialized. So
I got mixed up. I knew you had planned on doing a little bit of travel.
Yeah,
a lot of it was based around what you're doing this summer and this sports administration stuff. I know you like to go to different places and see different stadiums. That's just another MO for you. You and I went down to Florida one time. That bring up Naples, right? Remember that summer we saw the Twins down there doing the summer
training. That was March.
Like I said, that was the spring. It wasn't summer. We saw spring training down there.
Yeah.
Right?
March 13th. So
anyway, you're more of a sports guy than I am.
Yeah, no kidding. Who knows? Tell you what, there's 2 professional baseball teams in Florida, and maybe by next summer, I could potentially be employed with one of them. So
if you do, maybe I'll go work at the Snook as a busboy or something.
I'll come there all the time. I promise.
If you
just not on game days, Greg. Just not on game days.
Well, maybe I'll be busy podcasting. This is Greg podcasting from the Snook as a busboy.
Don't mind the accent. So let's see. So our summer, of course, wrapped up in a whirlwind, and you try to, if you're wondering what it's like to move your family from spending a summer in the US to get ready to go back to the Middle East, we had a really light pack. In other words, we only had 10 hockey bags. We use hockey bags because they're really cheap to replace and they're easily patched with duct tape. And so we only had 10 bags. Usually we have 14 or 15, but we knew our time here is going to be wrapping up in the next year or so. And so this could potentially be our last year here. And so we knew we didn't want to bring a lot back. So 2 of the or 3 of the bags was just hockey gear. One of the bags was my golf clubs. And so then we had everybody had 1 bag each with clothes and shoes and stuff. We threw it in the truck and we headed down to Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. My brother was kind enough and good enough to ride down with us because we took my truck. It was great. And we got there and Stacy and Carew and I needed to get a PCR test. The only problem is in Minnesota and Wisconsin, nobody does a PCR for travel test. None, 0, zilch, nowhere. And so for example, a couple days before we had to fly back, we went to a clinic and they did the correct test and everything, but they don't have the proper form that has somebody's signature and a blue stamp and then a QR code like you have to have in the Middle East. So anywhere else in the world you could have used this for. So it wouldn't have worked. So we had to go to the airport 2 hours earlier than normal. So we had to get there 5 hours before our flight. And they had this one little booth set up that did the travel PCR tests. And so when we originally rolled in, one of the airport guys was like, yeah, they're not taking walk-ins. You can't go there. And we were like, crap, our flight leaves in 5 hours. There's nowhere else to get this done. It's amazing how, anyway, don't even get me started on that. So, so we went up to the PCR area where they do the testing and the lady's like, yeah, come on in, no problem. $200 a piece. So we had to pay $600 for the 3 of us. And I think we had our results in 18 minutes or something like that. It was crazy fast. And it ended up working out just fine. We got back through the airport, no issues, pretty boring flight. It's amazing how once you do a 15-hour flight, how quickly the next one goes. I think I took a nap and watched 3 movies and we were landing and we were back. It was crazy how fast that flight went. So,
that's the thing about travel, Matt. Is that we've become such good travelers. And I guess the COVID, if people are talking about COVID and how it's stressed out the travel and everything, but even for international travelers, even for those of us experience, it's stretched us an extra bit. But I guess I don't think twice about, you and I are both very similar. We don't think twice about a 3-hour flight. I mean, that's nothing. A 6 to 12 hour flight for us is normal. And multiple flights, 2 hours in an airport as an overlay, we hope we have, because usually you can't get through customs and all this other stuff, even for getting a next flight. I don't run through airports, so I want to make sure I have enough time. I'd rather be on time 2 hours early than be 3 minutes even 3 minutes close to the gate closing than I have to run through an airport. We did that one time for the Maldives. We ran. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that anymore. But for traveling internationally, there's things that we just look at like we don't think twice about, setting aside an extra couple $100 for each person that's traveling for extras, like an emergency fund, having an extra 1,000 in cash in Benjamins ready to go just in case you have to bribe somebody, or you have to, I'm sorry, maybe that's not a good word, but maybe you have to have a little extra cash. Bribe is a good word. Bribe somebody
outside
to
the
get
US,
through.
yes, bribe is the proper word, or propina.
It is.
Tip.
Right.
Right. Is the more
Gringo
politically
tax.
correct word. Yeah, yeah. And for
Gringo
some people,
tax,
that's totally inconceivable. Like, you're going to bring $1,000 with you. It's like, well, you have to. Like, you just don't know what issue you're going to run into.
And that's minimal. I mean, you might be stocking up on your cash. You might be bringing back like 5 or 6 or even up to 10, because that's the max we can bring in officially. Sure. I brought 10 back, and I brought 10 overseas. I go to the bank, get 10 grand in cash, because it saves me for, the next couple of years. I might have extra cash on hand, but we don't think twice about, buying an extra ticket at the last minute. We run into all of these problems as professional travelers, and it's taken us a long time to figure out the best credit card to get for points or to get us into certain places. Right now, I've got this amazing card to get me the Chase. Was it Reserved? Is the one that gets you into the what are those places that I'm thinking of? That's that you can get into?
Chase Sapphire Reserve. The Chase Sapphire Reserve. Get into any airport lounge that you desire. Chase
Airport
Sapphire
Lounge.
Reserve. Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
Brought to you by Chase.
Sapphire Reserve.
Yeah, it's a great card, and it's taken me a while to figure that out. Years, of course, but things evolve, and I've never had a lot of money before to even have one. But I think, like you were saying, I mean, you learn how to travel, and part of living overseas is learning how to travel. We talk a lot with our friends about what they do when they travel different routes. I have friends that know every route for the main European flights over to the States, because they've lived in different parts of the world. They know the main flights, through their favorite airline. Right. Yeah.
If I were, if I were just somebody who didn't travel a lot and I was thinking of taking a trip, the first people I would contact are international teachers. Guaranteed they're going to have insights on do this, don't that. You don't go through here. Don't go through the seventh labyrinth of hell that is Paris's Charles de Gaulle Airport unless you have minimum 2.5 hours. Let me tell you what, don't get me started on that airport. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to our summer wrap up and what we did. It was nice to be back yakking with Greg on the mics, and hopefully we'll get back to now our regular occurrence. And I think we might have to bring Kent in just for an episode, just because I love that dude. I love talking to him. So he's all about that energy. If you want to contact us, you can get a hold of us at International Teacher Podcast. It's spelled just like that all sounded, at gmail.com. Look us up on Instagram at ITP Expats. That's ITP EXPATS on Instagram. And we have Twitter too, which we don't really use, so don't worry about that. Sorry, Twitter people. Greg, it was nice chatting with you again. And this is Matt. Good to have you back, Matt. Hey, it's good to be back. And I'm going to sign off. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again.
You are Matt, the family guy, and I am Greg, the single guy. We'll see you next episode. Thank you.